The U.S. midterms are less than 2 months away. That means the American news cycle from here on out will be dominated by coverage of each race and how the result could dramatically change the American political landscape. From newspapers to news apps to tweets and shares, voters can consume their news in more ways than ever. U.S. President Donald Trump has called the press sick and dangerous and the enemy of the people. Betsy Fischer Martin used to be among those targeted. Martin spent 23 years working at NBC News. She served 11 of those as executive producer of Meet the Press. She worked closely with the late Tim Russert and is credited with helping him become the highest-rated political host on U.S. television. She's since left NBC. Martin is now an executive in residence at American University's School of Public Affairs. She also founded her own consulting business, Fischer Martin Media. And Betsy Fischer Martin is in Montreal. Hi, Miss Fischer Martin. Great to see you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So you're on this tour of Canada ahead of the American midterms to speak about the influence of mass media on the views and voting behaviors of Americans. So I wanted to start there. How do you evaluate the current state of American media and how it's affecting Americans and their voting and their potential voting patterns, I guess, ahead of those midterms?
Well, we have a very polarized media right now in the United States, and as a reflection of that, you see a very polarized electorate as well. The media sphere that we're operating under, we have sort of a center sphere and center left, and then we have a very far right media outlets like Fox News and Breitbart and Daily Caller, who are sort of driving that part of the electorate and are very much used by the White House and this administration to kind of fire up their base ahead of these midterm elections.
So what's so bad about that?
Nothing's bad about it. It's different. It's something that that's been developing over the last couple of years. And midterm elections in the United States are really mostly about motivating your base to get out to the polls.
So what is if this is a very polarized media environment, what does a non-polarized environment look like?
Well, an environment, for example, where candidates are coming on and doing interviews together, where there's this notion of trying to work together to pass legislation and to get things done. Unfortunately, that does not really win you an election anymore in the environment that we're in. It's all about talking to your base voters on either the far right or the far left.
And so how do you, I guess, I'm not sure if evaluate's the right word, but what is your perspective on how politicians in the United States, let's say in the months coming up now to the midterms, utilize that to their benefit on both sides of the spectrum, or do they at all?
Absolutely they do, and they sort of pick and choose the media outlets that they're going to talk to. For example, we have a governor's race in Florida, and during that primary process, we had two Republicans running. One of them, who was not very well known in the state, did not have a lot of money, but decided to go on Fox News 92 times during the primary election, essentially, get the attention of President Trump, and then thereby get the endorsement for him in that primary race, which was critically important, and of course he won. So, the politicians are being very smart on sort of how they're using the media spectrum right now.
Do you think the media landscape is past the point of no return?
It'll be interesting to see if things ever kind of come back to a more centrist atmosphere, but honestly, over the next couple of years, I don't see that happening.
Is it, I feel like there are a lot of people who enjoy the fact, I guess a lot of people just listen to things for an echo chamber, but I know people in my own family who love the fact that they can tune into one, MSNBC for a bit, then go to Fox, then go to CNN. I guess that's based on the idea that they can ascertain through listening to all that what the truth is. But is that the case for everyone?
Yeah, I think that's more the exception than the rule. I do think people tend to kind of live in their own news bubble, right? And just watch television channels that they agree with on cable, read the blogs that they agree with, curate their Twitter feed, their Facebook feed along those same ways. So we kind of get in this sort of siloed environment.
I know I asked you already about the sort of if it's past the point of no return, but how do you, if the goal is to get back to an arena where more people of differing views can appear together and can talk and debate the issues out, where does that occur? Because I know, your experience is with a traditional outlet. I'm part of a traditional outlet.
Exactly.
But how does that, we're not going back to that time, I think, where that was all there was.
Right, and you all have probably found, I don't know, but this was the case when I was at Meet the Press at NBC, it was getting harder and harder to get, for example, politicians to come on and do longer interviews, kind of put themselves through the paces of a tough but fair interview because it's too risky in this environment and they can circumvent the entire thing and it's not something that they really have to do.
So what do you think that that's it? Like that's where it'll end, or is there a path back to that? Or
I don't know. I don't have the media crystal ball to figure that out. But if the electorate is any indication, and we're in this polarized environment, I don't think that it's going to kind of come back to the center anytime soon.
I want to ask you about another sort of issue percolating over the past few weeks, and that's, of course, it's been, I guess, 6 days since the New York Times published that anonymous op-ed describing a resistance movement within the White House. And I wanted to get your take on the decision to publish that op-ed. Do you think it was appropriate?
I do, and it's also, the biggest parlor game in Washington right now is trying to figure out who actually wrote it. But I do think it was, it was a newsworthy item, and if you're in the news business, that's what you take into consideration. I do think the New York Times, gave consideration to it. They've been very clear that they insist that it was a very high senior administration official, and one of these days it's going to come out. But I do think in this environment, I do think it was the right thing to do.
Do you think the combination of that op-ed, for example, and the revelations in Bob Woodward's book and Fire and Fury before it are going to have any impact on voting patterns or voters? It
doesn't seem to, at this point, be an issue that kind of voters out there are really caring about. It's consuming Washington, of course. And it's, the stories that have come out in the New York Times op-ed and Bob Woodward's book are not new in Washington. There are things that's been discussed if you talk to people in the administration. These aren't secrets that are going on. But I don't think that actually percolates out into, the rest of the country. I think they kind of see that as a lot of Washington noise.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Thanks a lot for your time, Ms. Fischer Martin.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.